Imagine for a moment a world of social media that is filled with connection, compassion, kindness, and community. A social media space where, at the end of the day, when you're done scrolling, you feel nourished and you feel like you've given resources and received resources. I know, it sounds kind of ridiculous. The world of social media as we know it is kind of a dumpster fire. We've got the overly glossy Instagram photos. We have hatefulness, name-calling, even racial slurs. So much divisiveness, in fact, many of you may have even sworn off social media altogether. Well, I want to share a different kind of story, one that I will call Project Village. My story starts the night of March 13th, 2020. I came home from my full-time job working in public education to my husband and my 2 kids, who were 9 and 14 at the time. We were making dinner that Friday night when we got the dreaded email from my school district. Our schools were going into a 2-week quarantine to stop the spread of COVID-19. Soon after came the stay-home order from our city, and I felt like a punch in the gut had happened. And everything that I knew that felt certain and routine and normal was instantaneously cut off. I imagine many of you may have had the same experience when you got the news in your part of the world. So after I managed my anxiety and had some time with my family that night, I got a flicker of an idea. What if I went on Facebook and started a little Facebook group? Just a space where I could connect with family and friends around the country who were getting similar stay-home orders in their parts. A place where we could stay connected and share ideas and maybe even a little joy during this scary time. I decided to call my group Project Quarantine 2020, and I only had one rule for the group, and that was no news sharing about COVID-19 in this group. We had all been flooded with information about rising cases of coronavirus, and this was going to be a space free of anxiety. I pressed start group, I closed my computer, and I went to bed. The next morning was a Saturday, and I opened up my computer, and to my astonishment, 60 people had already joined the group. Now, sure, it was mostly friends and friends of friends, but I was elated, and I got to work starting to make an activity sheet where parents could build forts out of pillow cushions with their kids or do a scavenger hunt around the house, any kind of activity to keep us busy while we were staying at home. Over the course of that weekend, member requests continued to flood in at an incredibly rapid pace. By Monday morning, 1,000 people had joined the group, and by the following Friday, just a week later, there were 10,000 group members all around the world. So now I went from elated to a little bit of, holy smokes, what do I do now? How had I, this shy Texas girl, become an accidental influencer? I had to quickly learn how to moderate a large and diverse and quickly growing Facebook group. And I'm a social worker, and so the nature of my trade is when we are in crisis, which the pandemic certainly was, I go into resource gathering mode. I started putting together files in this group page where members could access different kinds of activities, online things they could do with their kids, such as visit a museum in France or visit a zoo in San Diego from the comfort of their laptop on the couch, or activities for how to keep our kids engaged in online learning, mental health resources about how to manage our own stress and anxiety during this scary time. The group continued to grow and grow until we reached our largest of about 42,000 group members all around the world, large and diverse group membership. And though we were all experiencing a global pandemic, we all had incredibly different and variant experiences of that. Over the course of the next few months, as the group grew, I began to hold weekly Facebook Live events with various experts. Once a week for about 3 or 4 months, I would bring in somebody where we would engage on a Zoom screen, such as a physical therapist, to talk to us about keeping our bodies healthy while we were working from home, or mental health professionals to talk to us about stress and anxiety and how to take care of our hard emotions we were having, learning experts to talk to us about how to keep our kids engaged in their online learning. It was a scary time we lived through, and as we know, there were many divisive and hard things that our world went through during the course of the pandemic. Our group leaned into some hard conversations and sometimes disagreements and some divisiveness around Black Lives Matter and how do we become allies against systemic racism. Hard conversations about mask mandates and vaccines. And as you can imagine, a lot of the divisiveness and sometimes the ugliness of social media showed up in my group as well. And so, again, being new to this world of social media and moderating a Facebook group, I had to really lean into some of my leadership skills. There were times when community members' behaviors did not align with my values of community and connection and the safe space I was trying to create in my social media platform. If there was some ugliness, I would say, nope, not here, not in this group. Or I would say, you are welcome to stay here, and diverse perspectives are welcome, and I hope you can learn from listening to others. However, comments that lack kindness and compassion are not welcome in this group. Sometimes I would reach out through private message and try to engage and have conversation with group members, and sometimes that went in some interesting ways. You see, so often in social media, we find ourselves in echo chambers where we're only surrounded by people that look like us or think like us. And this group gave us a different kind of experience. It gave people an experience of getting to engage in conversation and to listen to others. And yes, it was challenging, but I think it really created a very unique opportunity for all of us. And as we began to emerge from quarantine, and 2020 turned into 2021 and 2022 of pandemic, the name of the group did not seem so apropos anymore. And so we went from Project Quarantine 2020 to Project Village. And the idea of the village for me really encompassed what we were trying to develop in this group, and I think what we accomplished, which is a place of connection and joy, and yes, disagreement, but civil discourse and community for one another. Here's what I hope that we can take away from my story of Project Village. Social media is still in its infancy. It's only about 20 years old. And about 49% of the world's population is on social media for an average of 2.5 hours a day. Why would we tolerate a world of social media that is ugly, divisive, overly perfect, sometimes hostile, when we can each play a role in creating a different kind of social media experience? Here's what I hope that we can take away from this. That some of the comments I got from people in Project Village, community members said, thank you for what you've created here. This group was just what I needed at a time that I've never felt more lonely and afraid. And this place is always a source of joy and inspiration. What if we could take that kind of social media experience and each of us have some accountability in bringing that into all the social media spaces that we participate in? I am a certified Dare to Lead facilitator trained by Brene Brown, and there are 3 skill sets of leadership that really helped guide my thinking as I moderated this Facebook group and what I encourage all of us to take away. And I think of leader as not just the traditional form of leadership where it's somebody that's in charge, but really a leader is anybody that can impact whatever space they are in person or virtual. And so the 3 skill sets are vulnerability and holding space for vulnerability, empathy with our fellow human, and staying grounded in our values. Here's how this showed up in Project Village. We certainly, with vulnerability, had plenty of that to go around, didn't we, during the pandemic? Nothing felt certain or normal, and everything could change at a moment's notice and felt like an emotional roller coaster. In fact, if I ever hear the word pivot again, vulnerability felt like messiness, having hard conversations, and being brave with one another as we had these conversations. Vulnerability looked like me as a working mom having Zoom after Zoom meeting with my colleagues online while helping my kids with their online learning 10 feet away. Vulnerability for all of us felt like not doing anything well, and vulnerability felt like isolation. So in Project Village, we were able to share stories with one another of vulnerability and hold space for one another in support and compassion. The second skill set is empathy. And empathy truly is a skill set. It's not something that we're necessarily born with. It's something that can be developed and built like a muscle. Empathy in Project Village looked like this. We're all in this together. And comments like, "You've got this," and "Stay strong." We can bring empathy into any social media space we choose to with courageous leadership. And number 3, staying grounded in our values. As I shared with you, my main values that are my North Star for everything I do personally and professionally are those of community and connection. Ironically, those were the main things that were cut off on March 13th, 2020. My ability to connect with my people and my ability to stay in connection. And that's what drove me to start this Facebook group, and I think that is what drove people to join it and to be part of that community. When I stay grounded in those values, then I can call out when people are not in alignment with those values. What I hope that we can all do going forward is that we reset how we show up in social media and that we call out the ugliness, we call out the bullying behaviors, and we say, "Nope, not here." We say what's okay and what's not okay. And instead, we can call in the ability to be vulnerable with one another, to be imperfect, and to stay in messy conversations and learn from one another in conversation. And that we call in the ability to be compassionate and kind. You see, the village that I'm imagining is an online space that's filled with empathy and compassion and human connection, and that's what we all need. If we can do all of those things with vulnerability, empathy, and staying grounded in our values, perhaps we can make the village go viral. Thank you.